A bulldozer rents for $300 to $1,000 a day, an eye-catching number that makes it look like the obvious centerpiece of any equipment fleet. A mini excavator rents for a quarter of that, $250 to $450 a day. Put those two numbers side by side and the bulldozer looks like the smarter purchase every single time. It usually isn't. The bulldozer costs $50,000 to $200,000 to acquire and typically needs 200 to 300 rental days at modest utilization just to pay for itself. The mini excavator costs a fraction of that and, because it's in far higher demand, often gets rented far more consistently. Open an earth-moving equipment rental business chasing the biggest, most impressive day rate on the price sheet, and you can end up with a yard full of expensive iron that looks dramatic sitting there and performs worse, dollar for dollar, than the smaller, less glamorous machines parked next to it. At the surface, this looks like a simple business. Buy heavy machinery, rent it out by the day, collect the difference. Underneath that, it's really a capital allocation problem wearing a construction yard. Every piece of equipment you buy is a bet on two things at once: how much it costs to acquire and how consistently it'll actually get rented once it's sitting in your yard. A machine's day rate tells you almost nothing on its own. What actually determines whether a purchase was smart is the relationship between what you paid for it and how much revenue it generates relative to that cost over its useful life, a number that has surprisingly little to do with how big or impressive the machine looks. This is also a genuinely capital-heavy business from the start. A properly built fleet focused on earth-moving equipment, excavators, skid steers, loaders, commonly requires $500,000 to $2 million or more in total fleet investment, putting it firmly among the more serious capital commitments in this entire series, even before the first machine gets delivered to a job site. The range here depends heavily on how broad a fleet you're building from day one, and whether you're starting with a handful of machines or a genuinely diversified rental operation. A lean entry point, focused on a small number of high-demand, moderately priced machines like mini excavators and skid steer loaders, can get underway with a meaningfully smaller upfront commitment than the industry's high end, since these machines typically run $25,000 to $60,000 each, rather than the six-figure territory of larger earth-moving equipment. A genuinely diversified fleet, mixing smaller high-turnover machines with a few larger pieces like bulldozers or excavated material haulers, pushes total startup capital into the $500,000 to $2 million range once every machine, from the smallest compactor to the largest bulldozer, is accounted for. Here's the part that catches almost every first-time operator off guard. The purchase price on the invoice is never the real cost of owning a piece of heavy equipment. Insurance, ongoing maintenance, transport logistics to and from job sites, and secure storage all add up to real recurring costs that a lot of first-time buyers simply forget to price into their day rate, discovering only after the fact that what looked like healthy revenue barely covers what the machine actually costs to keep road ready. Buying the machines is the easy part, relatively speaking. Here's what actually makes running this business harder than the day rate math on a spec sheet suggests. A parked machine is a pure liability, not a neutral asset. Equipment sitting in your yard generates zero revenue while still accumulating depreciation, insurance costs, and storage expenses, which means an underutilized piece of equipment isn't just a missed opportunity. It's actively costing you money every single day. It isn't out on a job site. Maintenance has to run on hours, not on the calendar. Heavy equipment needs servicing based on actual usage hours rather than a fixed monthly schedule, and a fleet operator tracking maintenance loosely instead of rigorously risks catastrophic mechanical failures on active job sites, the kind of failure that doesn't just cost a repair bill, it costs the client relationship too. Reliability is the entire product, more than the equipment itself. Contractors renting heavy machinery are working against tight project timelines, and a rental company whose equipment breaks down or shows up late doesn't just lose that one job, it tends to lose the client's business permanently in an industry where reputation moves fast through a genuinely small circle of regional contractors. Price competition from the bottom of the market actively hurts you. The cheapest rental company in any given region typically also runs the thinnest margins and struggles hardest to properly maintain its fleet, and competing purely on being the lowest priced option in your market is a genuinely difficult way to fund the maintenance program that keeps equipment reliable enough to be worth renting in the first place. Assume the fleet is acquired, insured, and out-generating rental income. Here's what it costs every month just to keep the operation running. Warehouse or yard rental for storing and staging equipment is a genuine fixed cost, regardless of how many machines are actively out on rental in a given week. Fleet maintenance requires real, ongoing capital, not just for scheduled servicing, but for the inevitable unscheduled repairs that come with running heavy machinery across demanding job sites. Insurance for a fleet worth hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars is a significant recurring line item on its own, scaling directly with the total value of equipment you're carrying, regardless of how much of it is actually earning revenue that month. And this is the part that quietly separates well-run operations from struggling ones. A widely used pricing framework in this industry suggests targeting roughly 5% of a machine's purchase price per month in rental revenue, sustained across a meaningful share of the year at healthy utilization, to land in the 35 to 40% gross margin range that keeps this business genuinely profitable, rather than just busy looking. Here's the comparison that should reshape how you think about fleet buying decisions in this business, and it runs directly against the intuitive instinct to chase the biggest, most impressive machine on the lot. A bulldozer commanding $300 to $1,000 a day looks like the stronger earner on a spec sheet. But at a real-world 40% utilization rate, a common benchmark for this equipment class, that same bulldozer needs 200 to 300 rental days just to pay back its $50,000 to $200,000 acquisition cost, a payback timeline that can stretch well over a year, even with reasonably steady demand. A mini excavator or skid steer, by contrast, typically costs a fraction of that to acquire and tends to see meaningfully higher utilization because it's the workhorse machine a much broader range of contractors need on almost every project, not just the largest ones, measured purely on revenue generated per dollar of fleet capital invested, rather than on the headline day rate. These smaller, less dramatic machines frequently outperform the big-ticket equipment that first-time operators instinctively want to lead their fleet with. The machine that looks the most impressive parked in your yard is often not the machine actually paying for the rest of your fleet. Let's check out two different scenarios. The heavy iron operator builds a fleet weighted toward large, expensive, high day rate machines, betting that premium equipment commands premium pricing power and fewer local competitors. This owner captures strong margins per rental when utilization holds up, but carries significant capital risk per machine, and a genuinely long payback runway if any single piece of equipment sits idle for an extended stretch. The utilization-first operator builds a fleet weighted towards smaller, moderately priced, consistently in-demand machines, accepting a lower day rate per unit in exchange for dramatically more consistent bookings across the fleet. This owner's capital is spread across more machines instead of concentrated in a few expensive ones, and total revenue per dollar invested tends to run meaningfully stronger as a direct result. Let's take two operators as an example, both launching with $500,000 in fleet acquisition capital, same regional market, same general demand environment. The first operator invests heavily in a small number of large, impressive machines, 2 bulldozers and a large excavator, betting that premium equipment will command premium margins with less local competition. Utilization across those 3 machines settles around 38% in year 1, close to industry benchmarks for this equipment class, but well short of ideal. Annual revenue looks respectable on paper, but with such a large share of total capital concentrated in just 3 machines, payback on the full fleet investment stretches well past 2 years, and a single extended maintenance issue on any one machine meaningfully dents monthly cash flow. Second spreads the identical $500,000 across a much larger number of mini excavators, skid steers, and compact loaders, machines a far broader range of local contractors need regularly. Average utilization across the fleet climbs to around 68% within the first year, comfortably inside the healthy range for this business. Total revenue lands close to operator one's, but because that revenue is spread across many smaller, cheaper machines instead of concentrated in a few expensive ones, effective margin runs meaningfully higher, and payback on the full fleet arrives well inside the first 2 years. Identical starting capital, identical general market, completely different outcome, because one operator built a fleet designed to look impressive, and the other built one designed to stay busy. An earth-moving equipment rental business isn't really won by owning the biggest, most dramatic machines in the yard. It's won by understanding that a machine's day rate is almost meaningless on its own, and that the real measure of a smart purchase is how much revenue it generates relative to what it cost, sustained consistently across the machine's working life. Whether you're starting with a handful of mid-size machines or building toward a genuinely diversified multi-million-dollar fleet, the underlying discipline is identical. Buy equipment that will actually stay busy, not equipment that simply looks the most impressive parked next to the office. Get that balance right, and this remains one of the more genuinely capital-efficient businesses available once utilization is dialed in. Get it wrong, and a yard full of expensive, impressive machinery can quietly be earning less, dollar for dollar, than a much smaller fleet of the unglamorous equipment nobody bothers photographing for the brochure.